Hello.
Hello, everybody. We're still on the starting soon screen, but we're gonna switch over to the podcast screen in just a second. Hold up. I just gotta click. Boom, there you go. Let's do that. Welcome to the unnamed podcast. We have a few names, courtesy of Asen and Nathan. We have Oof Podcast and we have SciTech Attack so far. Just let us know what would you like to be named for this podcast. Let me know if you guys can hear Asen and Nathan properly. Take a second.
Hello.
Go. So this is episode 1, powered by MemoryExpress. It is named Pilot. I noticed that Asen and Nathan named their episodes, and I was trying to do the same thing. And same thing that you do with TV shows when you're trying to get it to take off. You call the first episode Pilot. Hey. Anyways, enough of my stupid jokes. Asen and Nathan, you guys have your cold ones?
Absolutely, dude. Always ready.
All right. Cheers, boys.
Cheers. Oh, he popped the top.
Popped a bottle, man.
I'm too poor for bottles. Bottles cost too much more money.
It's a Rona.
It's a Rona, dude.
It's a Rona. But yeah, so
Like body.
let chat know why we just popped the cold one on the boys.
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
Why you gotta throw me under the bus like that, dude? Obviously, we pop a top with a cold one because that's the name of our podcast. We are the cold one with the boys. I honestly don't remember how that story came to be, except for I know it had to do something with Sin's girlfriend. So
Yeah, she thought of it, and it's a meme.
It's a me.
What? That sounds really good because, like the whole story of our podcast is the person we're hanging out with or interviewing. That whole experience of talking to them is the cold one that you take in.
Ooh.
that didn't make any sense to me, but we'll go with it. I would just
almost
leave.
a year in and you don't know anything about our podcast.
Dude, I just show up and talk to people. Like, that's what I do.
Okay, so Gwen is in chat, and that's Asen's girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
So she's the one that came up with it. That's a good idea. Cheers to you.
We're literally sitting in Discord one day, and we're sitting there trying to think up of names, and I think Gwen just threw it out there. She was like, "Why don't you just call it Cold One with the Boys?" I was like, "Let's do it." Like that literally sounds good too. It's a good name for a podcast with two dudes that people think are actually friends. But there's an underlying little thing here. Like, we're not friends. We're just like co-hosts. Like, we don't like each other. We're just business partners. Like, that's what we leave it at.
Yeah.
Like, douchebag back here. Like, I actually have to sit in the room with him and look at him right now. Actually, I have my chair turned away so I can't see his face.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
dude, you can see my balding spot coming in real nice.
So we're gonna segue to the first question that I'm gonna ask you tonight. So Asen or Asen. Asen. Sorry.
That's a song, but it's okay, dude.
I'm trying not to screw it up. It's my first podcast, guys. I'm sorry, guys and gals. Asen, what is the worst thing that you hate about Nathan?
Ooh.
This is the question you said we'd talk about an hour, right?
Yeah.
The thing I hate about him.
Let me answer this.
Hold on.
Actually.
What?
Let me
You're gonna
guess what
answer for me?
You're gonna get a turn.
About to say.
All right. Go ahead.
I'm trying to say this without making myself sound bad. What? It's another word for laziness. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm a procrastinator.
I don't. Like, are you saying in like what I hate about him in podcast, like as a podcast partner, what I hate about him the most? Or
In general, as a person.
Oh.
We have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions about doing podcasts in a second. But we're gonna jump straight into the
Here
personal
we go.
questions.
This could kill the podcast. Let's hear this.
what I hate about him the most.
Come
Man,
on.
like I know this is a podcast. I'm supposed to talk right now, but I really, not to sound really like stupid or anything, but I don't really hate anything about Nathan.
No. not a nice guy.
I mean,
That's
as a
so
podcast
cute.
partner, I hate him, but
I'll fess up to it. I procrastinate a lot. Like, I'm in charge of like the YouTube side, like keeping the YouTube videos updated, and I'm not very good at it because I'm a procrastinator. And the problem is, most procrastinators just put things off, and eventually they take care of it. I put things off, and then I forget about it, and then since like, bro, you haven't done YouTube in like 4 weeks, I'm like, oh fuck, right? So yeah, I get it.
But life gets busy, right? We got stuff going on.
Right? Yeah, I work at. I don't work at 9 to 5. I work at 7 to 3. I got things to do when I get home. I got other things to do sometimes. Not really. I just come home and sit on my computer, but like I'm here anyways. I might as well do it. I just forget.
all right, now go ahead and ask him. I know you're gonna ask him what he hates about me, so I want to hear this.
All right, Nathan, what is the worst thing?
His slack jaw mouth, dude. It just never stops sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. But basically, a sin is that one friend that I have that he always uses this ghetto quote, and I can't ever remember what it is. Something about blood or of the covenant or something. You'll have to go ahead and say the quote so I don't sound like a moron.
When the hell have I used that quote? It's been like years.
Dude, you just...
Okay, it's blood of the covenant is thicker than water of the womb, meaning that the people that you choose to associate yourself with become more important to you than family, or they become family.
I wouldn't say they become more important than family, but like
they become families.
Right, like me and Asin, like Asin is basically one of my brothers. I have a younger brother and an older brother, and then I've got Dickhead in the room with me. And that's basically how it is. Like we're family. We've been family ever since we met each other throwing rocks at Walmart when we were in like 5th grade. So there's nothing really about him. The one thing about Asin is he goes to the dark side on a lot of things very quickly, and you kind of have to like talk him out of it. Like something will happen.
What do you mean?
Like, oh, that motherfucker hates me, and I'm like, no, dude, he doesn't hate you.
Oh, okay, I know what you mean.
Like a pessimist.
He's a pessimist. I guess I'm a pessimist, but I'm also a realist. Like I prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. So I would call that a realist, but.
I mean, that's exactly what I am too. That's exactly what I do too.
My wife hates it. She's like, you literally always look at the worst possible option. I'm like, well, you have to, because if you're an optimist and you're always looking for the best things to happen, you're gonna get let down 95% of the time. So you plan for the worst, hope for the best, and you meet somewhere in the middle and make it work. But not to get too far off topic, we'll be here all night.
It's all good, man. It's all good. That's the whole point of the podcast, is the chit chat. I'm gonna go into another, not really personal question, just kind of, my expertise is in the gaming industry. So what is your favorite games, guys?
I guess I'll go first. I mean, World of Warcraft has been my favorite game forever. Since I started playing it, of course. I don't remember when I started. Wrath Baby is what I was. I just don't remember the era of that. But other than World of Warcraft, probably some of my favorite games is Conflict Desert Storm. That's one that we used to play a lot when we were kids. And the Far Cry games I've played have been pretty good.
Yes.
I think the most recent one was Far Cry 5. It's actually got me into it because it was co-op, and I love co-op games, but that was a lot of fun. But like, me and Sam were actually talking about this the other day. We're like, we're actually not really gamers. And I was like, what? And he's like, we don't play very many games. I was like, you're right. We have our niche games that we play, and that's about it. So I guess I'm no longer a gamer, and I don't know how I feel about that.
You just got like chopped off the totem pole, dude. You're gone. My favorite games are Atlas and Anthem.
Oh, Jesus. Get that trash out of here, bro. I'm just
kidding.
Trolling right now.
Honestly, I've seen gameplay for Anthem, and it looks amazing, but I've been so... I don't even know what's the word for this, but like I'm so hesitant to buy anything from BioWare and EA since like the last 2 years. you know, because of all the things that have happened.
EA is what we like to call a dumpster fire of a company right now. Like
Mhm.
literally, I've been watching Twitter people following the Anthem game, and I don't remember who it was, but they pulled up a picture and like an armor pack, like to buy a set of armor for the game was like $30. I was like, wow, like they're coming out hard with microtransactions. That's all EA is. It's a money grabbing company, and I think that's why their games are never going to make it. Of course, people they're going to build up the hype coming from like E3, all these different conventions. People are going to swarm to the game hoping for something really good. They're going to make a decent game to draw people in. They're going to get all their money and then they're going to not do anything with it, kind of like Star Wars. But like I don't know why people don't see that.
Well, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, how many chances do you give them, right?
Well, fool me once, shame on me, or fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Like it's the same thing. I don't think it's ever going to change. I think they lost the benefit of the doubt when Star Wars Battlefront happened.
Yeah, the only EA game I'll buy at this point is like The Sims.
The
'Cause those,
Sims.
those are consistently,
They're
they're
always
good,
been good.
fun games to play every once in a while. But yeah, I was kidding, by the way. Atlas and Anthem are
You mean
Atlas
Arc 2?
is getting a little better, I guess, from what I've heard, and
Hmm.
I've seen Anthem gameplay. It looks amazing, but once again, the reviews aren't so hot.
Well, I
And
mean, they have time to spin it around, but I'm not too sure. Not too sure if I can trust them
Well, like
personally.
I'm not a big sci-fi gamer. I don't like sci-fi stuff. I'm fantasy, medieval fantasy, sword and board. Uh, Sci-fi has never been a thing I've cared about. I don't really care for Star Wars. I don't care for Star Trek. Anything having to do with space and the future with aliens, like I'm out basically. Um, but it literally to me looks like Destiny 2 mixed with Warframe, and I didn't really care for either of those. So Anthem is probably I'm not even going to give it a look. Like I just have no interest in it. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to about it.
wreck, dude.
But
Before we get off topic, do you find that a lot of games are kind of going with that same mentality of Destiny type games or hardcore grind kind of games rather than actual campaign?
No, actually, I feel like MMOs are actually losing their touch, which is
mm-hmm.
what that grind. That's
Yeah.
what I like out of a game. Is I like the grind. I like putting a lot of time into one game, but that's actually not. There's no games like that anymore. Like Far Cry 5, you can only put so much time into it before you're like, all right, I beat it like three
Right.
times now. What am I gonna do now? So that's what I don't like about the games coming out. There's not a lot of replay value or any value of continuing to build your character, and that's why uh, back to the original question, without trolling, uh, one of my favorite games is also World of Warcraft because for some reason it's fucking kept my attention since it came out in '04, and I keep coming back to it. But apart from that, Age of Empires 2, dude.
Age of Empires is a good one. We spent a lot of time on that game.
Age of Empires, yeah.
I would like to say CS:GO is in there, but
Yeah,
other guy in the room just gets triggered too fast and can't keep playing. I can't do this.
I can't handle cheating, man. Like when it at low ranks, especially now that CS:GO is free to play, I can't handle how many cheaters are in CS:GO. So
Especially when it went free to play.
yeah, there's just a lot more people that
Oh
are playing
man.
now, and that just added more people. But this is the thing I've heard above, like when you get out of silver, it's great, and you don't really run into hackers ever. But I'm always going to be stuck in silver because
Yeah.
I can't get out from all the people. So
A lot of the videos I've watched, even people on YouTube say that they wall and aim hack just to get out of silver, and then they turn it off and they don't use it anymore. So a lot of people that watch YouTube CS:GO videos, like they hear that and like, oh well, I'll do the same thing, and then literally, I think I've probably gone 20 games in the last couple months, and I would say at least one out of every 3 games you could tell there's a blatant cheater in the game,
yeah,
and it just ruins it because, like, if Valve or Valve, if they could come out with a way to tell me 100% if somebody on that team was cheating immediately, like if I knew I just sucked really bad and that's why I was losing, it wouldn't be as big a deal.
Yeah, so
But there's no way to know if you actually suck or if that person's cheating. So like it's hard to continue to play the game because like you want to get good at it and you want to have fun with it, but if you're constantly running into somebody that shoots you as soon as you pop around the corner when they shouldn't know that you're there, like it's just like
It just ruins the game. Like it ruins the fun.
yeah, it does.
They're killing a wonderful game and it really sucks.
I'm gonna go to the next question. I know we can talk about CS:GO for hours. I mean, I love CS:GO. We can talk about CS:GO for hours. We're gonna skip to the next question. Why did you guys start your podcast? And why did you guys? I don't know. Why did you guys do it together? Like, why didn't Nathan do his own thing, or why did Asen do his own thing rather than working together?
I should have done my own thing.
Wow, that's what I'm talking about. It just needs to be cold one with the boy, and like I'll go sit out in the hallway or something.
No, like we were planning it maybe 6 months before we actually sat down and recorded and actually wrote some shit down to start it. But it's really because I was a big podcast listener, and we wanted to start a podcast, and we were thinking of all different kinds of ideas on what we wanted to do, and we're both gamers, even though we both got kicked out of that genre.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not gamers anymore, I guess. But no,
enthusiasts, gaming enthusiasts.
There we go.
That's a good one. Yeah. No, we just wanted to start a podcast just because I love the medium of a podcast. Like conversation is lost in nowadays society. Like when am I going to sit down with even a quarter of the people we've had on the podcast ever sit down with them and actually have a conversation? Like it's not going to happen. It just doesn't, unless you have a podcast or some kind of medium like that to do it,
or a convention to go to and meet up with the people.
Right. And even then at a convention, what are you going to do? Like in the middle of them with all these crowds around them, be like, hey, you want to do an interview real quick and hold out a mic or something? You don't get the opportunity much to actually sit down with people. And some of the guests we've had, including yourself, on the podcast is like, just blows my mind that, we got to sit down for an hour with them and just have a conversation. So
I actually didn't even want to do a podcast at the start of this whole thing. Like being blatant, like I was getting ready to start the whole process of streaming. Like I was wanting to get into Twitch streaming. I just got a new rig. I was getting ready to set up my older rig for a streaming PC, start a dual PC stream. Like I was trying to get all my birds. I was trying to get everything I needed together to start this gig because I wanted to go into streaming with everything. I wanted to have the mics, the webcams. I wanted to have the perfect setup, which people say not to do. But for something like this, like I'm almost a perfectionist. Like I need to have, higher than average quality to get started. Because for me, whenever I see streams, like if it's not, well put together, well thought out, like it can't hold my attention. So I was getting all this stuff together. And Asin sat down one day and he's like, you know what? He's like, have you ever listened to podcasts before? I was like, no, what is a podcast? He started explaining it to me. And he's like, instead of doing streaming, why don't we do a podcast about streaming, dealing with content creators? We can branch off and, talk to other podcasters, talk to people on YouTube, from Twitch, from, any kind of content creating platform. And then basically I just gave up the whole idea of streaming and we started this podcast thing. So
yeah,
it's
it wouldn't be a good
fault.
Streamer anyway.
Wow.
Hey, I'm a good
Whoa. Shots fired.
Yeah, my back of my head is burning.
So how do you guys organize your podcast? I showed you guys like a script that I ran with that I typed up. I was telling us chat, if probably gonna laugh at this. I got back from the gym really late last night and I was still kind of running on energy from my pre-workout, and I didn't sleep till 4 a.m. So I started. So that's why you saw me posting on Twitter every like 2 minutes, because there's like idea, post. So I wrote out the script at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I wrote out the script, and it's just a bunch of questions, and I separated. This podcast is going to be separated into 2 sections. and there's going to be a break in the middle. But how do you guys set up your podcast? Because I know it's I was going to say completely different. I'm going to say it's a bit different. Give myself a bit of credit. It's a bit different than the way that I set up this podcast.
Yeah. We don't.
Well, we started out with some kind of structure, and then we kind of just did away with it.
Yeah, it's like our structure is as simple as we do the intro later, and that's the only real structured part of it. The whole middle, the actual meat and potatoes of the podcast episode is freeform. It's mostly unedited, other than maybe if there's something that is really loud or something that's distracting from the conversation, I'll go into editing and take it out. But things like,
Sin's annoying ass voice, we try and edit that out.
Yeah, like we usually don't edit things out, and then at the end we put a little outro that's pre-recorded and everything, But that's really the structure. And when we got started with the podcast, we both read. We didn't actually read it. We listened to an audiobook called
Podcast
Launch by John Lee Dumas. And if anyone wants to start a podcast, I recommend it to anyone. But it's a really pretty short listen. It's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. And it kind of walks you through all that stuff, like structure and what you should do before the podcast, what you should have ready to go. And it just, there's all different kinds of podcasts out there, all different kinds of structures. And it's really up to what you are doing with the podcast and how you should structure it. So.
Like we used to, well, we still do for every episode that we have talking points.
Right.
Whenever we get a guest to commit to a date and a time for us to set up, we start basically doing background checks, and that sounds really weird, but it's almost
mock us.
Yeah, right. We start kind of like delving into your social media, because we're trying to find out as much as we can about the person before we do the interview, because sometimes whenever you sit down with people that you don't know, it's kind of hard to strike up conversation. So we try and learn as much about the person as we can, because some of these people that we have are referenced to us from other people. So that we try and jump in, watch some streams, and actually a lot of the people that we end up having on the podcast, we watch their Twitch streams regularly now. If there's somebody on, my computer is always open to Twitch, somebody's always on my page, and a lot of the time it's the people from our podcast. So we try and get to know the people a little bit beforehand, and we have some talking points before we go into it. But literally, I would say probably past like episode 10 or so, we have our talking points, but most of the time we don't even get to them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's like, the only reason we even look into people's like social media and everything is just for the slight chance, like we bring up puppies and they fucking hate dogs or something.
Yeah.
We want to stay away from things they don't like. Because the whole point of our podcast is introducing this content creator or whatever this person does to our community, so they can get to know them. Basically, getting to know the person, not necessarily by their job, but them as a person and what they're into. So
nice. So I feel like that's kind of what I wanted to do with the script. Like you saw on ASIN, it was just like bullet point. It was like boom, 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 boom. But no, you guys are doing good. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts before even getting on for my first episode, and then ever since my first episode, I still see it getting better and better. You guys are killing it. Plus the people that you bring onto your show. Can we talk about that for a second? Can we name drop some people?
Yeah.
Is that cool? Combination of Time. Like, first of all, holy shit.
We actually get that a lot, and Combination Time was like it was a reference from one of our APM streamers, which I'm going to name drop, Zaretta. She actually told us about him, and she said she watched him for fitness streams and stuff like that. I was like, that's dope. Like, Nathan used to be into bodybuilding, and
I'll drop the used to be in there. Damn.
For sure. But we checked him out, and we thought, as early as we were in our podcast, we were like, man, this guy's gonna look at us and be like, who are these two fuckheads like wanting me for an hour? And we asked him, and he came on, and it was a really good conversation. The topic was amazing. Like, I loved sitting down and talking about like health and diet, and unfortunately I'm not taking any of his points right now. But it's a good conversation. It was good information for people listening to it, so I enjoyed it a lot.
Going on that, it's a good segue to the next question. Is it hard, or how hard is it reaching out to acquire new guests for your show? Because like I said, you've had people like Domination of Time, Keontae, myself. Like, how hard is it to reach out to people, and are they willing? Are they hesitant?
Let's just say, out of all the emails and messages we send out, we probably get back
1/5.
a fifth. Yeah, I would say probably 15 to 20% at the max.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
so basically starting out in something like a podcast where you have guests on a regular basis, you have to get used to
rejection.
Well, not even rejection, but like
rejection would be nice, actually.
Yeah, I would love rejection. It's not actually rejection. It's just that you never get an email back. You never know if
they just never reply back.
Right, and you never know if like, well, this person might have been interested. Should I email it again later when we have more numbers or something to share? Like, you never know. So that's just kind of what you have to get used to. But yeah, acquiring new guests can be hard, and luckily, the guests we have had on they always tie us to someone else that we can keep going through, and when you have a reference, that's a lot easier because you can name drop at that point. You can be like, hey, we had this other guy on that told us about you, and they're like, oh, I know that other guy, and then they're much more willing,
right?
Because there's some kind of connection there. But when it's someone completely random, there's a fat chance they're not going to say anything.
Well, it's not even, I don't think that people are just ignoring us. I think a lot of the times it's hard to get in touch with people these days, because like on Twitter, if you don't have messages open, unless they follow you and you follow them, like the message box doesn't appear, because a lot of people have that turned off.
Yeah.
So we'll follow people hoping that they'll follow us back, open up that chat for us to be able to talk with them. If that doesn't work, we'll contact them via business email or personal email or whatever we can find. But the thing, a lot of people don't check email these days. I know I don't. So I don't know if it's people ignoring us, or like the avenues of getting in touch with people are much more difficult than what we imagine they would be at first. So
to be honest, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think most of the responses that we've gotten from people that have turned us down has actually been when they've had management teams, and we've been talking with the managers and things like that, because they're actually handling the people's emails, which makes it nice, because at least they're telling us not at this time, instead of just leaving us hanging. I hate when I don't get responses back. Like, I'd rather them be like, no, you're a nobody, a loser, like, we're not going to waste our time. That would make me feel better than not getting anything at all.
But that's a common issue in the industry right now. Like, even when I reach out to potential clients for WeHype or for DreamHack to do some promotion, sometimes like it's in their inbox and they don't, like, I see them opening it multiple times, because you can have that set where it shows like how many times they open it or when they've opened it if you link it to HubSpot. And I'm like, just reply back or say something. When you guys reached out to me to do the podcast the first time, you guys said, oh yeah, Tin, the Asian Invasion, referred us to you, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And we started the conversation, and then, like, I'm gonna be honest, as soon as we started the conversation, I messaged Tin. I'm like, yo, podcast? It's like, yeah, like, they're cool. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, like, see, that's another thing. Who knows if that ever would have happened if it were just a random like cold call, of asking you to be on. You're a nice guy. I'm sure you would have said something at least.
I would reply back saying like I'm busy, or I'd be like, oh, next week instead of tomorrow.
Right, at least that, But like it's especially with a lot of like really really big names, they either have talent agencies or they don't have contact information at all. And I understand that because there's a lot of internet trolls.
Yeah.
And I get it. It sucks. And I just don't know a way around any of that. Like when I started when we started this podcast, I felt like there was some higher network that you just don't have access to, where it has everyone's contact information that are like people are trusted, but that's just not how it works.
I think it wouldn't surprise me if that's how it is, though. Like, if you have like a management team, I feel like they can probably contact other people's management teams.
Oh, much easier.
Much easier than what a personal person could.
Probably.
A personal person could. God.
Personal.
I'm not.
Come on, man.
Today very well, by the way.
This is live on Twitch, man. This is not. It's not recording. You're embarrassing me. No, I'm kidding, man. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
Yeah,
so speaking of this being live on Twitch, what do you guys think are the difficulties? I can't speak to that either. What are the difficulties between recorded content like you guys do for your podcast and live to what I'm trying to do with this podcast?
Like, I think for us it wouldn't be that different because in like I said, editing, there isn't much editing other than if something was obnoxious to someone's ear.
Okay.
Then edit it out. But mostly our podcast is kind of live. Other than I spruce it up a bit on like background noise getting taken out and things like that just to make it sound more professional. But other than that, that's the biggest thing I think transferring to live is you have to do a lot more messing with audio and get it how you want it to sound and everything like that. That would be the biggest thing, I think.
Also, you got to put our ugly mugs on like a live television screen, and I don't know if I want to do that. Like literally, before Asin moved back here and we started doing the podcast not live, but doing the podcast together in the same room in my house. Like whenever we did our podcast with you, I was probably in my underwear with like my feet up on the desk, the beer on the table, because when you're recording podcasts, like you don't have to be presentable. Like you can have your belly hanging out, your feet kicked up. Like you can literally do whatever you want, and it's nice. Like I tell this to Twitch streamers we have all the time. Like I envy them because like having to get up and produce content for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, like you actually have to make yourself presentable, and I don't have to do that, and that's why I love podcasting so much. I don't have to fix myself.
There's been several episodes, like probably more than 10 or 15, where I've been in my underwear.
It's exactly, it's so comfy.
All
right, I'll keep that in mind. Once.
I mean, right now you could have just underwear on. We don't know.
Mucka TOS. No, I do. I swear I do. I swear I do.
I'm not gonna stand up right now.
Oh man. Let me look at the next question. Actually, I stood up. Yeah, I stood up. I think that's it for the first section of the podcast. We're going to take a quick break with a message from one of our sponsors, and we'll get back right into the podcast. So this sponsored message is from MemoryExpress. MemoryExpress has a limited quantity sale from January 25th to February 28th. Save on notebooks, tablets, desktops. However, it's only while supplies last and at certain locations. Sorry, and it may vary from location to location. All right, we're back.
Welcome back. I'm not supposed to say that.
Yeah, no. We good. All right. So the next section. All right, hold up. I'm gonna have to redo that sponsorship call. I kind of goofed it. I don't know if you saw it. Give me a second. So this is again for our sponsored. One of our sponsors, MemoryExpress. This is a sponsor's message from them. MemoryExpress is currently having a limited quantity sale from January 25th to February 28th. A save on notebooks, tablets, desktops. However, it's only while supplies last, and inventory may vary from location to location. Thank you so much, MemoryExpress. All right, I think I did better there.
Cool.
That's a Monka S. Um, all right, so
Good man.
it feels good, man. So that's MemoryExpress. They're actually one of my channel sponsors. Them, Humble Bundle, and Logitech.
I've heard of MemoryExpress on somebody else's channel, but I don't remember what it was.
Probably Keontae.
That might be where it's from.
Because they sponsor. So they have a sponsor program for content creators, whether it's Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, etc. They sponsor streamers and content creators on the platforms, and they also sponsor events. So all of the Twitch events that I run, and I'm pretty sure all of the Canadian events that are backed by Twitch, like official events, they're sponsored by MemoryExpress. MemoryExpress also sponsors. They also sponsor esport events as well. I'm not too sure what the list is for this year, but they sponsor esports events. Keontae is a partnered streamer with MemoryExpress. Marcel MD14, he's the organizer for Twitch Toronto. He's also a partnered streamer with MemoryExpress.
They sponsor podcasts.
What's that?
I said, do they sponsor podcasts?
Hopefully.
Yeah, give them my number, dude. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. But yeah, let's get back into the podcast. We're about 45 minutes in. This is going a lot quicker than I thought.
It goes fast, dude.
It goes really fast. Yeah, man, it goes pretty fast. I'm going to try and get as much done in the second section. We might go a bit over an hour, and I hope you guys are okay with it.
Yeah, that's fine. Spit it, bro.
All right. So we've talked about this, I think, twice on your podcast. What do you guys think about me actually starting a podcast? I know I talk a lot of smack, and I'm like, I'm going to do this, and I'm kind of like so many things on my mind, and so many things on the go. What do you guys think about it? Like, should I keep doing it? Should I do it once a week, once a month? What's your take on it?
I think, I mean, the amount of time you want to put into it is up to you as far as like if you want it to come out weekly or monthly or whatever kind of time you have to spend for it. But I think everyone should start a podcast if they're in any kind of content creation.
It's so much fun. Like
not only is it fun, like it's fun to do. It honestly doesn't take nearly as much time as streaming does, because streaming, I mean, one stream of 6 hours, you could get an episode done in that amount of time.
Yeah.
And it's just smart for exposure. If you're a YouTuber, if you're a streamer and you have a podcast on the side, even if 3 people are listening to that podcast, it's just another avenue that you can take advantage of. So I think it's smart for anybody, and you should definitely continue to do it.
Yeah, I was actually excited because you had continually told us you were wanting to start one, and I'm happy you finally did, and I hope you take it and you run with it, because it is another avenue of promotion for yourself and your companies that you're sponsored by and things like that. But what I love about podcasting so much, we kind of hit on it earlier, is all these people that we've met over the last year that I would never have got to meet in my entire life. Like, would I ever have bumped into you at a con or something? Maybe. Otherwise, I would never know who you are. Like, I might pass by you in a stream by chance. But the fact, like, I'm a lurker. Like, I don't get in Twitch chat very much and talk. So, like, we probably never would have been able to have a conversation.
Speaking of, like, I was at PAX West, and Keontae and Bunhead were there. And we're in the same building, but I didn't know them yet. We hadn't had them on the podcast. So, like...
Oh, no way.
Yeah, like it was just in the same building and never even, we didn't know each other at the time. So, like, it's crazy. But you should definitely keep doing it, man.
Like I was saying, you can do it as much time as you want to put into it. If you want to do it, if you can sustain a weekly podcast, that's fine. We know people that do a weekly podcast, daily podcast, bi-weekly. We even know people that do them once a month. So it's kind of like Twitch streaming, where if you got to kind of set a schedule, and the repeated schedule will help people continue to come back. Because if they know you do one once a week, they'll continue to come back and listen to it once a week. If they know it's bi-weekly, it's the same thing.
They're kind of waiting for it to come out, kind of thing, the next episode.
Exactly. So, yeah. I mean, you kind of have to set a momentum, and you kind of have to stick with it, because once you tell people you're going to do a weekly podcast, you get 4 weeks in, and then you take 2 or 3 weeks off. The likelihood of them coming back when you release an episode is probably less than if you continue to knock them out every week. So it's whatever you have time to do.
Kind of like Twitch streaming, where if I set a schedule and say, I'm going to schedule, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Saturday I'm going to stream, and then I just don't say anything. I just kind of take a break. I'm going to lose my viewership, and that's the same thing with podcasting.
Exactly.
So, okay. Next question. So I had a Twitter thread going on, and people were really interested because they know that I'm very involved in a lot of things, right? And they asked me, a lot of the questions that kept coming up was, what is the goal of the podcast? So my goal of the podcast is to educate the listeners on different types of jobs in the gaming industry, in esports, etc. Do you think this is an achievable goal through a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. Especially like if I don't know how much of the gaming industry that you'd be able to get on, but if you can get game developers, people that are part of esports teams, coaches, managers, people that put these huge events in order, like just there's so much mystery in the gaming industry that even I don't know. There's not a lot I know about like what happens behind the scenes of putting something like the Civic Center together to do like a League of Legends tournament. Like, I don't know how a lot of that background stuff happens, and I know it's a ton of people working as a team. So it's there's a lot of mystery there, and I think there's a lot of information that can come from a topic like that or a genre like that for a podcast.
And podcasts are like apps too. Like there's an app for everything, and there's a podcast almost for everything. So if there's not somebody out there interviewing people in the gaming industry, that could be something somebody would search for. And if there's a podcast that they found, they dropped by, saw you were doing a podcast on it, that could, those are just potential listeners that would be interested in something like that.
Because like I said, I am involved in a lot of things, and because I've done a lot of marketing in the industry, you can just look at the thread. A lot of people that are commenting and replying, they're game developers for Ubisoft, they're community managers for Triarch. Like these are people that I've met either at conventions or in passing, or I've met through somebody else. Not necessarily met in person, but we have conversations on Twitter almost daily. And as soon as I posted that, boom, I had so many people coming in and supporting it. So I think we, or I'm saying we, because I'm hoping to have you guys come back at some point when I screw up or something. But I'm hoping that the podcast helps people out the way that I would have wanted to be helped out when I started off in the gaming industry. If that makes any sense, because I try to do that as best as possible. Even at GMAC Montreal, I was offered a contract to do a bit more work because I had a camera and a microphone and I had a tripod. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I'm already getting paid. Like, I'm not gonna be greedy. I'm already getting paid to be here for a week. Getting paid a lot to be here for a week. And they're offering a bit more money because they're going to take me away from my initial task and do the secondary task while overseeing the initial task that I was supposed to be doing that week. So the secondary task was to follow around a Japanese fighting games community player as he commentates about what's happening in Montreal. And I did that for like a couple of hours in the morning, and I noticed one of Aloe Broccoli's friend, actually. You guys know Aloe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alan.
One of her friends, David, he actually goes to events with Nurtured Gamers and helps them out with photography. I think he's working with them now. But he flew in. Like, this guy hustles. He flew in, got himself an Airbnb on his own account, like his own money, and decided to volunteer as a photographer because he wanted the experience to get into the industry. And the second I found out that he was friends with Aloe, I was like, boy, come over here, you're getting paid, like, drop whatever you're doing. He's like, yeah, but like I said, I'm like listen, I'm staffed with WeHype, and like we're tied in with DreamHack. Like,
Right.
who's gonna say something? Like, come here, just come here, go get paid. Take my equipment, go do your thing. Any expenses that you have, like if you need to get another SD card, if you have to get it, Amazon shipped to your Airbnb or Amazon shipped to my hotel room, do it, and then we'll get expense. Like whatever you need, we'll do it. We'll get it done. So that's why I'm trying to help as many people as possible, as many people as I can when I go to these kind of events.
Right.
So my goal with the podcast is to do something similar and to bring on, let's say, game developers, bring on people in marketing, bring on people that do, community managers, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Try and have them come on to explain what their job is and how they got the job.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something I would be interested in listening to as well, because a lot of the questions we have about marketing and things like that, those people could answer those questions just doing the podcast with you. So I definitely think there's an audience that would listen to people with that experience for sure.
So what would you guys think of the structure should be? Because this podcast, being the pilot, is a bit different. I talked mostly about your podcast because you guys have a lot of experience podcasting. I don't have that much experience podcasting, so I'm kind of doing what I did in university and during my bachelor's degree, just kind of Google, my best friend Google, and looking up some stuff. So what would you guys, what kind of tips would you guys give me to ensure that the structure and the scripting and what have you is done properly or done adequately enough to keep hosting these podcasts?
I would say podcast launch by John Lee Dumas.
Yeah.
Dude, you need to listen to that because like it covers everything, from equipment to what you should have prepared before you start the podcast. And I mean, you technically started it, but if you can, another thing that John Lee Dumas says is for the first 100 episodes, you're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on like episode 54 is going to release this week.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're still learning. We're still, kind of forming what we want it to be. So the first thing I would do is read that book, either read it or get it on Audible. It's fine. Like it's an hour and a half and it'll give you so much information. I recommend that to anyone starting a podcast. But other than that, man, just kind of go with it and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like you can make mistakes and fix it in the next episode. You can continue to fix your structure on how you like it, and you'll just get to know more of it as you do it, because there's no one way to do it. I can't sit here and be like, this is the way you need to do it and that's what's going to work, because that's not how it is. It's kind of like streaming. There's all kinds of different avenues of being successful in streaming. So
our podcast is constantly evolving. Like every time a Sen comes over before a podcast, we usually convene like an hour and a half before each podcast just to sit down and talk about different things. And every time he comes over, we're constantly talking about what we can do different, what things that we can change, things we can improve on. It's a constant evolving show. Like we're always trying to figure out what we can do to make it better. We constantly change the structure. We let it go more free form. We try and keep talking points in there. But kind of how we've let it evolve is just conversation piece. So don't try and like hash out all the details right now and stress yourself out trying to perfect the perfect podcast before you're ready to launch with it. Get your general ideas, get what you want the podcast to be about, and then let it kind of grow. And as you do them, you're gonna get better at it. Like I won't even go back and listen to like my first 10 episodes because it like I can only imagine how cringy it is. I'm not the best sentence person. Like as you can tell, like I don't always have the best sentences to go together, and I can only imagine at the beginning of the podcast it was even worse. But like just learn from what you do, and as you do it, it'll get easier and better. And that's about all the advice I have. Just have fun with it.
Awesome. It was awesome to have you guys on the podcast. Always a pleasure to talk to you guys. Always a pleasure to hang out with you guys. Hopefully, we'll be able to grab a cold one at TwitchCon or PAX West this year.
I hope so, for sure.
I really want to see you guys at TwitchCon this year.
We're trying. We're looking forward to.
Yeah, we're definitely that's on our list of things to do this year for sure.
Yes, because I don't know if you saw. Well, you saw the pictures of last year's TwitchCon. Everybody was there. You're like, oh, you know Ashley? I'm like, yeah, I know Ashley. She's one of my close friends. You're like, what? I'm like, yeah. You know, that's a exactly. Everyone knows everyone, and it's such a good time.
I'm afraid now everyone's gonna want to go, and they're gonna sell out even faster.
Yep.
Oh, don't worry, no.
We're coming.
Yeah, that's why they're gonna sell out, dude.
Stand aside. The Cold One of the Boys podcast are coming through.
People are like, what? Who the fuck is that?
So last question. Last question. I lied. This is the last question. Who would you nominate, or how can I make this question a bit easier? Who would you nominate if you know the person personally? Or what type of profession in the gaming industry would you nominate to be my first official guest?
I mean, I have someone off the top of my head, and it's actually one of our most recent guests. I don't know if you've heard of what Game Hub is, but it's we just had him on. His name is Marvin. He's the creator of Game Hub, and he's working on a social network for gamers because, you know, Facebook, Twitter, there's a lot of other stuff on there. There's a lot of politics, a lot of other stuff that you don't necessarily want to see when you're wanting to pay attention to growing your stream and all that. So he's trying to make a gaming social network called Game Hub, and I would love if you had him on. And I just want to promote him in every way I can because I want to see it succeed. So that's who I would recommend if you wanted to have someone on.
Perfect. Nathan?
I would also recommend Game Hub because I'm probably I am 100% behind what he's trying to do. Like, I'm ready to get off of Twitter to where I don't have to see all the other negative crap about everything else in the world. Like, when I get on Twitter, a lot of it's to network and, you know, chat with people. And I feel like if we had a gaming social media for content creators, which is what he's doing, streaming, I don't know what he's got going on with podcasts and things like that, but just having a social media to go to where it's all about gaming and content creation would be nice. But somebody I would like to hear from is a manager of like a streamer's like a streaming manager, somebody that handles their
like a talent manager.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Handles their day-to-day business. You know, like I said, I want to know what it's like to be able to get in contact with these people that I have no way of getting in contact with. Like, what does that day-to-day life look like?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely try. Well, if you can send me the contact information for the guy from Game Hub, and I'll try and get in contact with someone from talent management. Hopefully, someone like Omid. I don't know if you've heard of Omid from OPG.
No.
Online Performance Group. That's what they do. Is they manage talent. They manage streamers. Whether it's you know, getting sponsorship contracts or helping them with taxes or what have you, they do everything and everything.
Nice. Yeah,
So,
I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah.
Would you guys have any questions before I let you guys plug in everything?
No, I don't think so.
I'm good.
All right. Well, go ahead and plug away.
Plug away, dude.
You can find us on Twitter at Cold One Podcast. I think everything we have is at Cold One Podcast.
Yep.
All we have is Twitter and YouTube. And what is our YouTube? I'm sorry, it's APM Network, isn't it?
Yes. You can check out all that stuff on actionsperminute.net if you want to get to any of our stuff.
There you go.
From there, like he said, we're at Cold One Podcast for Facebook and Twitter. And you can find our podcast, The Cold One with the Boys, on any podcasting app out there, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, any of those. So
sounds so much better, just Cold One with the Boys.
Well, thanks again, guys. I know this was super last minute. I think I had the idea at 10 p.m. last night. And I'm like, yo, you guys coming on? They're like, yeah, I guess we can.
It was a blast, man. Thanks for having us.
All right, man. I'll talk to you guys in a bit. I'm just going to do an outro, so I'll talk to you guys in a bit.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you guys all so much for coming into the very first podcast, the unnamed podcast for now, where we're going to be discussing a lot of gaming industry professions and how said personnel got to that position, whether we discuss the application process or whether we discuss the promotional process. We're going to try and get all that information for you. Like I said, like I've posted actually, cold1podcast.podbean.com or actionsperminute.net, and you can see them on Cold One Podcast. That was Asen and Nathan from the Cold One of the Boys podcast. And yeah, have a good night, everybody.